Hi, Jonathan. Thank you very much for joining us today. The last time we spoke at the WNA Symposium in London, uranium was trading around $60 a pound, and here we are now, it's over $100 a pound. Did you think that was going to be the case?
Thanks, Jimmy. Yeah, good to see you again. What a difference a few months makes, huh? This market is surprising us in many ways, myself included. I don't think too many people were expecting $100 or higher this quickly. The reality is that there's been a few additional market developments, a few surprising ones in the last few months that have pushed that price higher. But certainly $100, I didn't think, it's a bit of a psychological barrier that now that we've passed it, the market gets accustomed to that new level. But getting there in the short order, roughly for 4 months or so, was a lot quicker than I expected, and many did, I think.
UxC offers many different services, and the primary one is price forecasting to both the uranium and nuclear industries. And this is where I want to spend our discussion, is on the spot market. And I just want to start by getting a sense of how you collect your information and who do you speak to?
Yeah, so we're actually celebrating our 30th year in business this year. So, we've obviously been doing this for a while. And even before UxC was created, there was the Uranium Exchange, UX, which was the first supplier of weekly spot uranium price data. So they were a brokerage service and had a lot of contacts throughout the industry, and through their brokerage collected market data and published then a weekly price. That until 1987, there was only a monthly price, if you can believe it, in this market. So 1987, we started the weekly. UxC started in 1994, took over price reporting. And while we are not a broker, we are very tied into pretty much everything that's going on in the market with all the suppliers, all the traders, all the utilities. In many cases, have very good relationships with them, speak confidentially with many of them. One thing that we do is we never name names in any of things that we publish, like saying who sold, who bought what. So people are very aware of the way we handle data very very carefully. Of course, there are 3 brokers in this market, and we talk to them and see what they are posting as well. So our price reporting really runs the gamut from broker deals, direct transactions, but also you don't have to have a transaction to publish a price. So our definition is the lowest offer of which we're aware, taking into account both bids and offers and transactions, of course. A transaction is, by definition, also an offer, because that's where the seller is willing to sell at. So we're always looking for more data and creating new relationships. There's sometimes new traders, new funds, others that are entering the market, and we build those relationships, and through that we make sure to collect activity and what they think the market is doing. But again, there is no public exchange for this industry. We believe that the data we collect is the broadest based data. We actually always, every year, consistently publish the biggest volume of transactions that anybody publishes. So we know of more deals going on than pretty much anyone else. Broker deals are a big part of this market, but maybe half of the market is not brokered. So that's direct transactions between 2 counterparties over the counter without anybody in between knowing about it. And often it's only us, UxC, that learns about those data points. So that's how we collect our data. Is it perfect? Probably not, but is it the best there is? I think I'm pretty sure it is.
And just to clarify that last point you made, so a producer could phone a utility and they could transact together.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, look, we have utilities that often are very quiet about their activity and go to a select number of producers or traders and say, hey, I want to buy 100,000, 200,000 pounds spot or near term. what can you show me? And it could be just one entity they contact, and that's who they decide to do the deal with. They may shop around a little bit, and that could be very quiet, done very quietly, and no one else will know about it. Although, we'll go to a conference the next week, or talk to the producer the week after and say, hey, any new deals, and they will share with us that kind of transaction, or the utility will share with us that they procured something. So it may not be on the spot at that moment. Sometimes it is, but we generally learn about activity pretty much all the time.
And when you speak to these various participants, will they tell you how much is wanted at various levels, or how much is being offered at various levels?
Yeah, I mean, look, traders who are active pretty regularly have a good, pulse of the market, and will be able to say, hey, I'm seeing this offered right now, or I'm offering this, or I'm seeing this being bid. Brokers the same. A utility, a producer who's sort of in and out of the market less frequently, they might not have as much of that knowledge. I speak broadly here. There are some producers that are very regular, always tracking the market, and others who are less so, focused on the spot market and more interested in doing long-term contracts. So definitely, the people we talk to are the ones that are in the market regularly, actively, at all times. But we also talk to those who are less frequent, just that those communications may not be daily or minute by minute. These days with text, emails, phone, it used to be all phone based. It's moved obviously into the more advanced communication mechanisms, but it's still a people-based industry. This isn't a huge market. At any given point in time, you probably have maybe 50 to 60 parties that could be active overall in the market. So it's not huge, it's not tiny, but it's also not, it's not oil, it's not gas.
And so now I want to talk about the spot market and just try to get a sense of how tight it is. And as we mentioned at the beginning, the uranium price in September was $60 a pound. Now it's over 100. But that would indicate to me, with a move like that, there's not much liquidity in the marketplace. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, look, there have been a lot of pounds transacted in that period. So, if you measure it just based on volume, you might argue there's been liquidity. That said, have there been a lot of pounds looking for a home and no buyer? No. And what's been really the trend since, August, September of last year has been pretty much anytime you've seen a bid in the market, a buyer looking for procuring material, they've been met by an offer that is often some level higher than the last known transaction. So the sellers are able to basically dictate what that new price should be, and bidders have consistently been willing to accept that higher offer price. So that's been the driver. So from that standpoint, yes, there are pounds available, but the buyers have been willing and able to continue to buy at higher levels, and that's what's helped to push the price up. It's not huge volumes every day, every week. We've had some lulls in the market through that 4 or 5 months period, but overall, I can't think of a time where we didn't have anything going on in a week. We have a few days of quiet, and then all of a sudden it picks back up. But generally, as I said, I mean, that's been the trend, that sellers have been able to dictate higher prices. And whether it's the buyers that are, in need of material and just having to pay up, or are buying because they believe that the price will continue to rise, and therefore, willing, especially a trader, more of a speculative buyer, may be willing to take a bet today on a higher price, thinking that they'll be able to sell at a higher price down the road. Again, and that's been happening too.
With a move like this, do you get a sense that somebody might be short a lot of pounds, and that's why they're taking the price up as aggressively as they are?
It's always hard to judge, who's short, who's long. I'd say, compared to 2-3 years ago, traders, for example, are not sitting on material very long these days. So if they have material, either they have a place to put it already, or you know, are looking to move it pretty quickly and can. Utilities, there have been some, not a lot. I don't want to overhype it. I don't think utilities these days are focused on the spot market, especially at $100 plus. If they can avoid the spot market, they will. That said, we have seen some utility buying in the last 4 or 5 months. And then on top of that, you know, producers who may be underproduced need to cover. You know, there's a little bit of that out there. It's also not a major factor. The big one that we haven't yet touched on is the investors, you know, the funds. Obviously, everyone knows about SPUT, Yellow Cake, but there's also hedge funds, quieter funds out there doing deals. And you know, I don't think that those are the types that would be short. They're just betting on, you know, the market to continue to rise. So you know, I'm hard to say for sure, but I don't think that this market has a lot of folks that are short at the moment. I do think, though, that there are a lot of folks aware of the tightness and trying to get ahead of it, or banking on it to getting even more tight down the road, and you know, expecting perhaps a utility or someone who really is in a have-to buy mode to come out sooner and later, and at that point, you know, really can't say no to whatever the price is.
So in this current environment, in this market as it is would it be possible to buy 250,000 pounds or 500,000 pounds?
Yeah, I mean, look, most average deals are 100, 150,000 pounds. That's a sort of average size, and that's been consistent. Once you start going into the larger volumes, you know, there have been what you'd call maybe bulk volume premiums, as opposed to in the old days bulk volume discounts. You know, there's also a way to piecemeal it together. So if a buyer is looking for 500,000 pounds, they won't buy it all at once. They can take it from multiple parties and piece it together. But you know, if you take 500,000 pounds out of this market, the market is gonna notice that. The price is gonna move up based on something that big. And as I said, we've seen price moving on 100,000 pounds, single deals over the last 3-4 months. So yeah, I mean, look, there's not a heck of a lot extra out there looking for a home. That said, there's always some pockets of material available at the right price.
Right. So just to clarify, there are sellers out there, but if you want to get any meaningful supply, you're going to have to take it higher to get it in.
Generally, yeah. I mean, you might be able to get a couple 100,000 pounds at today's price, or even a slight discount. But if you want a larger volume, you're not going to get to that larger volume without moving the market.
So let's move on to the term market. Maybe you can give us some color as to what you're hearing there.
Yeah, I mean, look, so last year was a much very active year. We had some really big deals, the likes of Ukraine and China and some other buyers that really did big deals. The U.S. market was actually quieter than I thought it would be last year, to be honest. I thought the U.S. utilities might do more last year, and compared to non-U.S. utilities, the U.S. was quiet. That said, you know, we did have 160 million pounds overall contracted for last year, which was up pretty heavily from the prior year, from 22. Going into this year, it started out quietly, but that's not unusual. January, you know, utilities are evaluating their positions, looking at their open needs, and then going to management, getting approvals, moving forward on new strategies. Obviously, the price, especially the spot price moving up quickly, has also maybe changed some of the utilities' procurement approaches. Maybe some are trying to hold back and see if they can dip into inventory instead of using the market for coverage. That said, you know, there's still quite a bit of pounds that are needed to be purchased in the next 4 or 5 years, pre-2030. And then the uncovered needs post-2030 really ramp up significantly. So I suspect that this year will be active. Always hard to say. I mean, when you have a big price move, it's possible that you see utilities take a bit of a wait and see approach for a while. But you know, by the end of the middle of the year, later in the year, if they've been waiting and the market still keeps rising, I think at some point some just jump in and bite the bullet. And I can't imagine that you're going to have maybe under 100 million pounds transacted at by the end of the year. I think you could have more that or more. That said, it might be, as I said, maybe a little bit more out of the U.S., but you could see a lot of markets involved. Europe has been pretty steady. Asia, always good for some volume. The Chinese, I mean, we'll have to watch if they come back like they did as big last year as this year. But then, there's markets around the world that need uranium. And yeah, I think it'll be a pretty active, interesting year. So stay tuned.
So you made mention of the fact that in 2023, 160 million pounds were contracted, but you don't think it's going to be that high this year. But you also mentioned that the Chinese have been very aggressive, and I can only assume they're going to continue to be very aggressive buyers. There's also lots of chatter about the Russians have been very aggressive about buying and also buying pounds in the spot market. But when you add all this up, and then if you get the U.S. utilities involved, don't you think the prices in the term market could be significantly higher, and also the quantities?
Well, it's twofold, but look, I think the term market is always, this happens when we're going up and when we're going down. The term market is a slower moving market. There's always a time lag between price signals and then production announcements and the like, and vice versa. So demand in the term market is going to continue to be pretty steady, I think, and could still be high. I don't want to say for sure we're going to be below last year's number, but last year was reflective of some pretty big deals that may or may not be able to be repeated this year, because once a 20-30 million pounds is contracted for, that buyer may have several years where they don't need to cover anything anymore. That said, you're right, the Chinese continue to be growing quickly, building a lot of reactors, so their needs will grow, and their term contracting, I think, will grow with it. As for the price movement, look, going back to what I was saying, as far as there being a delayed response, the term price has risen. I think we're around $68 dollars as of end of last year. That's based on base escalated contracts that are signed today with escalation. So the future price that's paid on that contract isn't 68, it's 68 plus 3, 4, 5 years, 6 years of escalation. So, the producer will realize, higher prices out in time under those contracts. The other thing I make a point of is that a lot more contracting these days is referencing market-related pricing. And the floors and ceilings under those market-related contracts have come up a lot. They've been moving much quicker and moving more with the spot market. So, even if a term contract price looks like it's still well below a spot price, the future price that may be delivered on in that contract is going to be probably a blend of future market, i.e. spot price, plus that base escalated, so base price today plus escalation. So the producers will be seeing relatively higher prices out in time. And utilities are aware of that, of course, and as I said, trying to balance their costs and their future costs with what their needs are. But I do think that there's always a pull in these situations where the spot price moving quickly tends to then pull along the term price. That's already happened over the last couple of years. I mean, we were at sub $40 term price not too long ago. Now we're almost at 70, and it does feel like there's consistent upward pressure on that term price. So I suspect that as long as the spot price holds or even goes higher, the term price will move accordingly, just at a slower pace.
Are there any meaningful RFPs being shopped?
Right now, it's a little bit of a slow period, as I said. Not too many utilities in the prior year with a new tender going into. There are always some. So I could say people that might subscribe to our newsletter might see us write up that there's 3 or 4 active tenders out there at any given time. But then behind the scenes, there's always more off-market negotiations that are happening. So those are harder to assess. And in that sense, you might have bilateral negotiations between a trader, a producer and a utility that take a month or two to crystallize into a contract. So those are also always ongoing, but nothing really major that I'm aware of at the moment. More, the regular kind of typical volumes, a couple million pounds, 2, 3, 4 million pounds for one contract, that kind of thing.
UxC also provides market analysis on conversion and enrichment services. Maybe you can give us an overview of what's happening in those two segments of the fuel cycle.
Yeah, look, conversion is probably the tightest market of all three component markets right now. I mean, we've got good news last year in the restart of the Metropolis plant. We've seen improving operations in France, talk of expansions potentially down the road, but no firm commitments yet. And in the meantime, though, moving away from Russia, so that impacts the conversion space. And, some suppliers like Cameco are almost at their maximum, close to it. So it's a very tight market. Inventories were pulled off much quicker in conversion than in uranium. So we're seeing continued upward price pressure. We were at $46 last month. I think, we're seeing bids north of that today in the spot conversion market. And the term conversion market has also been quite active. Last year was a very active year with utilities very concerned, I think, about the future availability of UF6, of conversion and contracting based on that. So the market has moved and is continuing to move where the term price in all three markets these days, spot is ahead of term. Conversion, spot was ahead of term a lot earlier, but now term is catching up. And moving to the enrichment market, look, we might want to talk next about Russia and the situation there, but quickly what's going on, obviously, in the West, in US, Europe, parts of Asia, moving away from Russia, no new contracting. That means that all the new contracting is with the few Western enrichers. We did see both Orano and Urenco make announcements last year to expand capacity, and some of that was underwritten by new contracts, they said. So certainly that's a sign that enrichment is very active on the contracting side, but also utilities have been making moves to shore up future enrichment supplies. It is often the case that utilities will start with enrichment and then work backwards. So enrichment tends to be the first moving part of the fuel cycle. So prices have, though, risen not as quickly. We had a big jump right after the start of the war, and then since then they've been more steady. But the spot price for SWU last year did jump ahead of the term price pretty sizably. And that's a reflection of the lack of SWU, of inventories, sort of spot availability. And I think that some utilities are starting to worry that if they lose a Russian delivery or there's a cancellation or a delay, and they have to go in the spot market, the spot market is pretty dry right now when it comes to SWU.
So you touched on Russia, so let's go there. And the U.S. is currently trying to pass some legislation to prevent the importation of Russian uranium and services. Is that correct?
Yeah, so a bill passed the U.S. House of Representatives sort of second week of December, I believe, unanimously. So both parties agreed to that. That bill, H.R. 1042, basically implements an instant ban on Russian imports of enriched uranium, but then allows for a waiver process that buyers of enrichment services and or enriched uranium from Russia can continue to access that through the end of 2027. And there's still the same quota that we already have currently. That's been the law of the land, which is basically based on the Russian suspension agreement. So those quotas limit how much Russian enriched uranium comes in every year. But that bill, continues those quotas through 27. But by 2028, that quota goes to zero, and there's no more legal mechanism to import Russian EUP or uranium product. So that bill did go to the Senate at the end of December, and surprisingly, one senator, Ted Cruz of Texas, decided that he had other needs or political interests from the House, so he's holding that bill up on his own, hoping to get some other semiconductor regulatory approval bill passed by the House, which is his pet project. And so right now we're waiting for the Senate to move on that bill. Some people think it could be any day. The Congress these days has been quite inefficient, to say the least. So you never know what's going to happen out of Washington, but that bill is sitting there in the Senate and could pass quite soon. I'm not going to be able to say how soon because nobody knows. But there's bipartisan support for it, and I do think that it's not a question of if that bill will pass, it's more a question of when. And I think that's, it could be as soon as this spring or, could be next week. I just don't know.
So the fact that there's waivers involved and that it sounds to me like nothing's really going to change, is going to be business as usual. It sounds like it's just more grandstanding. Do you agree with that?
Well, to some extent, I don't disagree that, the market since February 22, utilities, US and others have moved away from Russia. They're continuing to honor existing contracts. Is that what you do in this market? Some have canceled, very few. But generally, the market has already been pricing in and factoring in a loss of Russian enriched uranium, maybe not immediately, but down the road. What this ban does, though, is for the first time since the war, formalize that. So until now, it's been self-sanctioning. It's been, governments sort of telling utilities don't do this anymore, that kind of thing. But this would be a formal legal ban. So there's a psychological effect to that I think would be still quite important. The waiver process you just talked about is completely unknown. We do not know how the Department of Energy and the government generally is going to implement that. It could be very onerous. It could be so difficult to implement that US utilities actually do see either deliveries delayed or canceled. And there's this outside chance, I don't think it's high, but at the moment it's not zero, that if the US ban passes in the US, Russia counter bans and does its own unilateral, just to the US, not the rest of the world, but says to the US, hey, if you're going to cut us off in 28, we'll cut you off tomorrow. And so there's that chance too. So all these things are still playing out in the market. And, I think some of the price run up, especially after those congressional activities I mentioned in December, had a big part to play in the psychology of the market and in the price run up that we saw after sort of mid-December.
Now, that's an interesting point. And when you said that, it kind of reminds me of what happened to the US in the 1970s with the oil embargo. And in a very short period of time, the price of oil went from $3 a barrel up to 11, which doesn't sound like much, but that's close to 300%. And it almost sounds like the same thing could kind of happen here with enrichment and conversion services, if Russia was to do that.
Yeah. Oh, if there's a unilateral ban, I think all bets are off, and that's not priced into the market. Let me make that clear. If that happens. Now, as I said, I think it's an outside chance. I don't think it's a, definite kind of thing. I think it's probably still very low probability. I think Russia has reasons not to do that. They sell uranium and enrichment and reactors to countries around the world, and they don't want to be seen potentially as, using that as a lever, political kind of cudgel that they can hurt any country with. It obviously is an option they have at any point in time. If they don't like someone, they can cut them off. But I think they would lose business down the road if they were seen as using that purely for political purposes.
Jonathan, the WNA has reported that there are 440 nuclear reactors in operation currently. There's another 60 under construction. 26 of those are going to be coming online within the next 3 years. And depending on the size, they might use anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million pounds. Then, of course, you need additional pounds for inventory. And I guess my question to you is, we're already running at a deficit, but where are we going to get the additional pounds for these nuclear reactors?
Yeah, well, look, the near-term new ones, utilities are pretty smart folks, and they've already procured for that. So they're not waiting to go into the spot market next year to cover for new reactor reload, first cores. That said, if we continue to see this new build pace, either, at least at the current pace or quicken, there's going to be a lot of demand coming down the pike. The other factor beyond what, new builds is keeping reactors online. We just saw things like Diablo Canyon and Belgium announce extensions. I'm watching closely if the Pickering plant in Ontario gets extended, which looks like a good chance. Those types of reactors tend not to have fuel pre-purchased. So in those situations, you could see a quick need arise for fuel. To your bigger question, will there be enough uranium? Will there be enough conversion enrichment? The market signals, the price signals, I think, are all there, that demand is growing and supply needs to respond. Supply response so far has been tepid, I'd say. We need a bigger supply response. We need more mines. We need more converters. We need more enrichment plants. All of that has to happen, and it has to happen now in a pretty short order. I think by 2030, we could see huge supply gaps forming, even with Russia continuing to supply, like, we mentioned. So I believe there are obvious signals being sent by the market right now. The reason the price is so high is that we need to see new production capacity come online. I'm hopeful that this year is going to be the year that we see, especially some new mining decisions. We've seen a few small ones, which are good. Some idle capacity coming back, but there's going to be a lot of new uranium needed in the next 10 years and further. And so far, I'm not seeing it all. So, but let me close with a hopeful statement. I mean, look. While the market is tight and we have a lot of supply concerns, I mean, it's great that we're talking about 60 new reactors and hopefully a lot more. Whether it's climate change, energy security, you name it, we need these nuclear plants. It would be a real shame if this resurgence, this new growth in nuclear power were stymied just because we don't have the fuel for it. So I'm pretty sure that the industry will rise to the occasion and we'll have that fuel when we need it. But a lot of hard work has to be done, and it has to be done soon to make sure that all that fuel comes online soon and supports that growing reactor fleet that we all want to see.
Jonathan, that was a great update, and I want to thank you for spending time with us today. If someone would like to learn more about UxC and its various services, where can they go? UxC.com. It's as simple as that. You can see it behind me here.
Look, we cater to the entire world. We're a global market industry data provider. Happy to entertain any inquiries at any point in time. All our information is on our website. Appreciate you, Jimmy, the opportunity to introduce the company if people haven't heard of us. But if you've been around uranium, I think you may have, but definitely happy to discuss more with anyone that's interested and wants to learn more about our products and services.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much, and I look forward to our next discussion.
Great. Thanks. Take care.